So, you think it might be possible to experience heaven on earth? Well, I do. And I think there's a very, very simple, easy, approachable, human way to go about doing it. Hey everybody, this is GP Walsh, and I don't often do interviews. And in fact, this isn't really an interview. But a very good friend of mine, a very close friend of mine named Martin Rutte, has for the last 25 years been engaged in a process that he calls Project Heaven on Earth. And he's come up with a very simple way to approach it. He's having enormous impact in the world. And we decided we would get together on a Zoom meeting and discuss it, discuss heaven on earth and the possibility of that actually happening. I mean, we can look around and we know we've done a really good job at creating hell on earth. What would it take to make that shift of perception that started creating heaven on earth instead? And also, how do we empower each of us, individuals, to make that transition take place at a grassroots level? Because that's where it's going to come from. It's going to come from us. It's going to come from our everyday folks doing our everyday lives, but doing them differently. So it's divided into 3 sections. The first one is called 3 Simple Questions, which is the 3 questions that Martin came up with that solidify this whole question of heaven on earth. The second section is called Is Heaven Here or There? And we talk about the story of Adam and Eve, the idea of us being thrown out of the garden. Can we actually get back in the garden? Is it possible to reestablish? What does this myth actually mean? And how does it relate to our lives? And how has it influenced culture by the guilt and shame we've been carrying around? Is it necessary to carry that anymore? Do we have a level of power and authority that we didn't know we had? And then the last section I call Pockets of Light. And Martin has collected literally thousands of stories over the years of how people are creating heaven on earth in small ways and in big ways around the entire world. He's got like 66 examples on his site. There's more in the book that we're going to talk about a little bit. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because once you see how easy it is, you're just going to want to join in because it's a lot of fun. So anyway, without further ado, let me get us into part 1, which is the 3 simple questions about heaven on earth and what a magnificent insight they bring. I remember when Martin first asked these of me, which was really one of the first times we met. I think it was the first time we met. And he asked me those questions, and it was just amazing the response that came up within me. And I think you're going to be amazed at what comes up in you as well. So without further ado, it's me, Martin Rutte, Project Heaven on Earth, and 3 simple questions. So as I'm saying, I just want to get into a conversation, and I'll put something around it.
Okay.
A little interview-like, but, nobody ever thinks of me doing interviews because I don't. I just talk about stuff. And when I find things that are valuable to talk about, I talk about them. And sometimes at great length. And so, right from when we first met, which was only 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I think. And you were already like totally immersed in this project of heaven on earth. And I think one of the first times we actually met and talked and sat down, you asked me the 3 questions. And it was just one of those wonderful moments of epiphany. And so I just, I've never had the opportunity to just kind of sit with you and find out what it all means to you. Because now I know you've devoted 25 years of your life to this.
To writing,
Right,
to writing
to writing that book.
this.
This one here. Move it over to your left a little bit. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah, that one there.
Yeah.
25 years in the making. So I really want to hear about what was it about that just so grabbed your attention that and hasn't let go. I mean, it's like falling in love, right? It's like finding your
Exactly.
soulmate. It's like, it's over. Game over. This is it for the rest of my life. So I really, I want to find out what goes on in your heart when that has just moved you for so long. So have at it. Tell me, tell me, tell me.
Well, I'll go back to some history. I knew from a child that I was here to change the world. I can remember sitting on the front porch of my house in Hamilton, Ontario, steel town like Pittsburgh, reading all the newspapers I could get my hands on just to find out about the world, what was going on. And then I think my first major love affair was with this notion of vision. Love affair in terms of work was the notion of vision. And what is a vision? How does it work? What stops it? And I worked with all kinds of major companies, Marion Merrill Dow, Sony Pictures, Southern California Edison, spoke at the Harvard Business School 4 times on vision. All of this around vision. Then I had an epiphany experience and said, okay, I want to talk about spirituality and work, and devoted a good 20 years to opening that conversation in the world and deepening it within me, because I didn't see, well, put it another way, I saw that people's souls were not connected at work generally.
Right.
Maybe at home, maybe at work.
Yeah, maybe not.
And maybe not.
Yeah.
But more or less not at work. And so how could we open that inquiry for people in a way that was respectful and useful? I started a co-founder of a Center for Spirituality and Work at a business school in Canada. And so that spirituality and work, really, I was one of the leaders in opening that conversation. And then about 25 years ago, I was going to do a keynote address on spirituality and work, and I was off by myself meditating a little bit, and I thought, if every business in the world is spiritual, is that what you want? And I said, no. If we could transform business, because business is the temporal power in the world, we could transform the world. And then this thought, GP, popped into my head, oh, you mean heaven on earth? And I can remember saying, oh, no, you can't talk about that. And I thought, in essence, why not? Well, we could talk about hell on earth. That's permissible conversation. Why can't we talk about heaven on earth? Why can't we talk about the deep yearning, the deep longing people have for the kind of life and work and world that they want? And why can't that be permissible conversation? And why can't people act in simple, easy, concrete ways to make that real in the world? And so I think that transition from vision to spirituality and work to heaven on earth, as I look back, obviously as I look forward, I couldn't see it, but as I look back, it makes perfect sense to me. And it's my assignment. I'm supposed to, I love doing this.
I showed up in the morning and this is what they told me to do. Now, wait, I got to get the timing on this right, because that happened 25 years ago. So that's like 1993, around there, right?
Yes,
but you'd already been. So when was the spirituality in the workplace started?
When did that
organization?
Late 80s. Not
80s.
the organization, the insight.
The insight.
Late 80s.
Late 80s. I mean, that's like right at the peak of the really the creation of the whole modern and business environment, and the rise to power of corporations in the world. So what an interesting contrast, because somebody had asked me in the late 80s, if you could spiritualize business, I go, what, are you kidding?
I know. I've always had this I don't know. Somebody said to me, prophetic. It just, if when I see it and it makes sense and it just rings true, that's it.
That's it. I'm done.
I'm in. Yeah.
Because I was a software architect. I designed large scale software systems at that time, and so all of my clients were huge. Citibank and Chase and Wells Fargo and SBC, which was Pacific Bell, and AT&T and all of those guys. And I, I I was at a complete loss as to how any kind of. But interestingly enough, as I think about it, as you make me think about it, while the the systems and the procedures and the policies were all very rigid, right? The people weren't.
Yeah.
The people were really wide open and wanting to have a more powerful experience and wanting to have a better work-life integration and that sort of thing. Um, and I mean, you're getting me to rethink now all the experiences that I had because for this idea to start blossoming, and um, so once you got your assignment that morning,
That
I'm
was
in.
it.
I'm in. So how did it unfold for you? I mean,
Well, I knew, I was interested in this notion of inquiry, the ongoing question. So you keep asking the question, which deepens and broadens it. And I'm not a huge reader. I'm a huge interactor, relationship. And so I would just go around to people and say, what's heaven on earth? Tell me about heaven on earth. Tell me about heaven on earth. How does it work? What is it? And out of that, distill these three questions, which we'll get into. And that was like, oh, okay. Because what I wanted to do, GP, was to come up to you, if you're interested, and talk about heaven on earth in such a way that it released that heaven on earth knowing that's already within you and get you into simple action. That was the result I kept looking for. So if something I did or didn't do moved that forward, I continued. If it didn't, I stopped.
wow, just totally pragmatic on a
In that
subject that
sense,
doesn't seem all that pragmatic.
that's right. Yeah. High abstract. Well, yeah, I was very high concrete in a high abstract notion.
Wow, and in a high abstract world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, interesting, when I look at where I was born in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, where they make steel.
Right.
This is not a highly intellectual city. I mean, there is a university, but it's not these are working class, lower middle
Right.
class people, a lot of whom came after the war, had no English, and just did jobs that were manual. And so in that sense, but I mean, that world surrounded me, but I wasn't really part of that world.
Right. Right. I get it. So, wow. I'm just kind of one of the things that I really arced off on when you were talking about it as an inquiry, because as a spiritual teacher, with in the tradition of Zen and Advaita Vedanta, that's all it is. It's
Yeah.
it's not teaching. You don't teach. You don't tell people anything. It's always an engagement with questions. And when somebody comes up with something that appears to be, what they believe to be true, it's just simply questions. You just like begin to poke at it to find out if it really is. That seems to be the it seems to be the only way where someone can arrive at a conclusion themselves. Otherwise, it's information that's being taken in on the authority of someone else. Um,
Watch
and
this. So this word, right?
yeah,
Highly charged for people.
highly charged.
And so people would say to me, don't use the word heaven, use vision, use any other word.
Which you had
Uh,
been doing, right? You had been using the word vision.
in my, yes. And so they knew that. And so they asked me to continue in essence using that. But this wasn't that. At the beginning, I thought heaven on earth was, your vision. but much deeper than that. Then I thought it was your soul speaking, and then it was your essence of your soul. And now I really think it's your divinity, that part of you that knows what heaven on earth is. My contention, GP, is that people do know what heaven on earth is. And I have evidence for that, because I say to people, so I'll jump in with you here. This is the first of the 3 heaven on earth questions.
Okay.
Recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth. What was going on?
Oh, gosh, there's many of them that I could characterize like that. When my sons were born,
Yeah.
falling in love, times when I was a composer and some piece of music came to me, it was just transporting. I was in another place. Sometimes it happens when something catches my attention, a flower or a sunrise. It's just something all of a sudden grabs your attention and just stops you in your tracks. There's just this heavenly sense about it. And I could easily identify that. Yeah.
So watch this. Now, I know we've known each other, but your response, I want to talk about what you did not do, and which nobody does. So when I say to you, when I ask you, tell me a time when you experienced heaven on earth, you didn't say to me, Martin, what do you mean by heaven on earth? GP, nobody asks me that.
Nobody.
People do what you did, which is they answer the question. But in order for you to answer the question, there must be what I call an already knowing within you that knows what heaven on earth is. And you scan your life and you go, when my sons were born, when I see a sunset, a flower. So you know.
Yeah.
I think that's very important to bring out. People do know without being told. And once they have that experience, is brought to consciousness, they never again are concerned about the issue of the word heaven.
Heaven.
No.
Right, because it comes out of the theoretical or the theological and really becomes a quality of experience that every human being has had.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, oh, that was heaven. Right, yeah, that was it. Oh, I thought it was Iowa. No, it's heaven.
I'm just sitting here, I've asked people that question thousands of times, and I'm just hearing it anew and afresh, and how powerful it is.
Yeah.
We know.
We know.
We know what it is. And I want to bring that we know out into the world as normal conversation.
Wow. And, we live for it.
Mm.
Those are the moments that punctuate our lives. Right.
I was with my wife yesterday having breakfast, and we were just, very much in love. And she just said, I love you. Or I don't even remember the words, but I actually blushed.
And you're not a teenager.
This is 46 years later.
I've had that experience. All of a sudden, I'm just kind of blushing like a schoolboy.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a quality. There's a quality of about those moments, and I sometimes refer to it as the power of wow.
Yeah.
It's just there's something. It's so palpable and so present and so self-luminous about it that it's undeniable. It just has this quality of perfection and harmony, and how could it possibly be any better? And I'm just making a bunch of words to bring it home, but that's it.
Well, and you said something very interesting. We don't deny it.
No.
My wife's love yesterday. Oh, but that's not true.
It's not true. Yeah.
You would never say that.
No. That
you
flower.
Never think it.
That flower. Well, it wasn't really that pretty. No, there's this. And everything just stops. I mean, that's Zen. That moment is the whole of Zen. Zen isn't about all the the rich, all the things that people normally associate. It's that moment when everything stops except, and you are 100% there. And the experience is heaven. Wow. So
notice how we both went silent. I mean,
yeah, I mean, you just kind of like, it's like this nourishment that just goes right into your soul.
Yes.
I mean, it's like you've been starved for a long time and you just had a good meal.
Gourmet. 5-star. Yeah.
5-star. And it was exactly what you wanted.
So I'll move to
yeah, keep going. Keep
the second question, I don't know that I have a pen here. Imagine you have a magic wand, and with it, you can have heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth?
Mm. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and it's interesting because you've asked me this a lot of times, and my answer is different every single time, and it's the same, is a long string of experiences like that, maybe just life like that, but shared.
Ooh.
I can't imagine that just by myself.
Boy.
Yeah, there's something about this that says it has to be enjoyed. It has to be shared. It has to be,
Has to be we.
It has to be we. Yeah. I mean, an experience like that, the only thing that makes it better is having somebody there to go to say, "Wow, wasn't that great?" It's to know that there's a mutual common experience. Because I suspect if we really examined it, we'd find that the experience itself, while the circumstances, the conditions and everything are different for absolutely everybody, that the essential experience was absolutely the same.
I don't know if you know Patricia Albert's work on mutual awakening.
Mm-mm.
It's fabulous. Yeah, but that's exactly what she's talking about. It's the time in our human evolution is now about we, to experience we, rather in addition to I shouldn't say rather than I. So the second question here is a magic wand, and with it you can have heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth? And notice, GP, you went right to it. Well, I'll comment on the questions at the end. The third question: what simple, easy, concrete step will you take in the next 24 hours to have more of that?
Something popped into mind, and I know others have done this, but all of a sudden I have this impulse to do it, to just kind of make reference to that something that just automatically goes with me. I think I'm going to add it, something about heaven on earth, to my email signature, so it goes out with every one of my emails, including the ones I send out to my mailing list.
Lovely. Thank you.
There's something about that, of just injecting that word into the conversation that I hadn't seen before.
The phrase,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because things like Zen and various kinds of experience, but in our particular culture, those words have less meaning or emotional content than the word heaven does. And we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the primary experience of our being, right?
Yes.
Indescribable, as you said. I've called it this. I've called it that. I mean, nobody really knows what to call it. It's unnameable, but we all know what it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
So let me go through the three questions, and then I want to go to the notion of heaven with you. So question one, recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth. What was going on? And as I said, what happens is people go right to an experience or experiences without questioning what heaven on earth means, without asking me. The second question, the rationale for the magic wand, GP, is to remove the necessity for you having to know how this is going to happen. And if you don't have to know how it can happen, then you can just go purely into the what. And you said, in essence, more moments like this. Yeah. And imagine doing a workshop, which I've done, in which 100, 200, 300, however many people start talking about what heaven on earth is for them. It's incredible what happens in that room. Mm. And then the third question, I want to begin having you take an action. It's lovely to have this experience, the question two, but for me, I need to, engage with it, which is why the format of this book, it's like, it's a workbook, because when I was writing the book, it started out as an idea, as a possibility. But as we got into it, I said, no, it has to be engaging, because I want you to come out of the book with what the knowing of what heaven on earth is for you, plus a project of whatever. And it could be as simple as what you just said. I'm going to include this at the end of every email. Fine. That's huge. It's actually huge. Yeah. So those are the three questions, and they get at the notion of, you do know what heaven on earth is. You've had an experience. You know what heaven on earth is. And by taking that first action, you're in the game. You're in the new story. Because if we have GP and Bill Smith and Joan White and so on and so on, if we have more and more people, which we now have, this becomes more than just a good idea. It's actually showing up. On my website, projectheavenonearth.com, I have 63 stories of people who are taking heaven on earth out into the world. And all the way from, interestingly that you said this, because I don't know if I said this to you before, all the way from adding your definition of heaven on earth at the end of an email, all the way up to a woman in Austria saying, Austria is going to be a heaven on earth nation. And I went, whoa, why, Elizabeth? And she said, because it's simple. This notion of, isn't that amazing?
Amazing.
This notion of simple.
And so it is.
And so it is. I've been looking again and again. People will do, in terms of a project like you, adding that idea of heaven on earth at the end of an email. What happened was the woman in Hawaii who came up, originally with the idea of embedding her definition of heaven on earth at the end of an email. I spoke about that in a webinar, and a woman in Chile said, ooh, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that too. And I'm going to add the second question, Martin, which is, here's how she structured. The first thing she puts at the end of her email is, imagine you have a magic wand, and with it you can have heaven on earth. What is heaven on earth for you? And then she says, for me, heaven on earth is, and she answers the question. And that goes out with every email.
Wow.
So simple, 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 simple.
Simple.
And as somebody said to me this week, simple is the driving force here. I went, oh my God, yeah.